Hello, everyone. This is MMA Interesting Prospects podcast. Today, our guest is Lucas Rosa. Will fight on Combat FC 10 June 13th. Hello, Lucas. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Just got back from some hard training, so I'm feeling good. Ready to take on the rest of the day.
And Lucas, you are a very busy fighter because it will be your seventh pro fight in like a little bit more than a year. So if you can tell me how your body is feeling after this kind of schedule, and how do you feel before this fight against Vesta?
Yeah. So my schedule. I think I just love to push the pace, and like for me, training is an obsession. Like I love what I do. So to me, it's like I feel a privilege to be able to engage in something every day that I love, that I feel like brings out like my best attributes every day, things that I feel like bring out my best virtues and is also a way to inspire other people. So, even the days that I wake up and, feel like really overtrained and that sort of thing, like I just think to myself, like, hey man, you get to do this. This is a privilege. You get to. So yeah, I try to always push that pace, and I always say with my brother and my coaches, I say, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And so that's kind of my attitude that I've had since I started my first pro fight in May of last year. And so I went on a string where I think I won six pro fights in I think it was a 9 month span. So I was trying to get to seven pro wins in a 1 year span, but I was actually supposed to fight up in Ontario, Canada, and unfortunately, like my opponent had visa issues. But I'm supposedly going to fight again in Ontario in September for a title. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, I'm always trying to push the pace. So like, I mean, if it was up to me, there would have been more fights, honestly. So I mean, I think I always feel ready going into fight camps. I try to reduce risk in my training. Like I feel like the gym that I go to, American Combat Gym, it's really great because I have all the attention that you need. It's sort of a medium-sized gym, but I get the level of training uh, that a UFC fighter would, and I get the looks that a UFC fighter would, and I get sort of that attention leading up to my specific fight matchups, and I think that's really really important as well. So yeah, I do a great job, I think, game planning and strategizing, which I think is also part of the reason why, my fights have all gone pretty much under half a round. They've all gone under half a round. I think they've all been at least under five of, I think the six were under 2 minutes. So I think part of that too is being able to I think one of the biggest things I fine tuned from the jump to the amateur to the pro is my finishing techniques and my finishing mechanics. And I think those sort of things really help because it turns a fight that, could be, you're dominating, but could be 3 rounds where you take a lot of punishment. And instead it becomes, a 1.5 minute, sort of excursion there. So I think that's really helped my body stay in shape as well, so I don't have to take on injuries and take time off because I think that's consistency is the biggest part of training, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, and leading up to this fight, I feel great. I'm excited. I was a little. I think I was like bummed out for about a week that my fight in Ontario didn't happen. I ended up doing an exhibition grappling match, which was cool, but with a Peruvian necktie. But I think like there's nothing quite like having the joy of like being able to go back to New England, Boston, like my home place, and try to show up for the crowd and inspire the people who all watch me grow up, or the kids now in the same neighborhood that I grew up in, like looking to me as a role model of the hometown. So
Probably this is like the only moment in your career that you can be like super active, because when you get to the higher stage, like maybe UFC, maybe like PFL, you will not be able probably to fight 6 times a year because it's usually like two or three. Sometimes like Neil Magny had years that he had 5 bouts, but it's like super rare. So I think that it's like very good that you are like collecting this experience and this week wins in such a quick time.
yeah, I mean I think that's a really good point too, because it's like you don't always have control of your own schedule as a pro athlete, and to me, I have the privilege of being able to fight as long as I'm ready. So yeah, that's a really good point.
And how many more fights would you like to have this year? Because of course, like we never know what's gonna happen. Like maybe some injuries, maybe something else. But in your like perfect scenario,
In my perfect scenario, I think, I would fight this fight in June. I would fight. I mean, I don't know. It's tough to say, but I would say I would want to try to get to 10 fights, like 10 and 0, hopefully by the end of the year. But you never know what happens. You never know. Again, like we had visa issues and stuff with people. You have people. I've tried to fight. I had like 3 fights locked down before this one finally got secured. Some that brought me, like I said, all the way to Ontario, where I'm literally there weighing in at 145, and then it doesn't happen. Or like even fights where I'm getting prepped. I'm like 3 days out. I was supposed to fight. I think in Miami against like a really tough Mexican fighter, and that one fell through too because of different issues that he had. So, um, yeah, I mean, I'm always trying to look to stay, like active and stuff. So, but ideally, I would fight. I would fight like probably another before the end of the year, the calendar year. I would try to get to 10. So I think you know when my career first started, I remember. I tried to go pro in February of 2024, and some things didn't work out. Um, and I remember then I sprained my MCL, and I just remember sitting there in April, kind of at the beginning of April, and being like, man, like I hope I can get to like 1 or 2 wins in the next year or something. And I remember my coach saying, look at me, saying like, there's no reason you shouldn't be 5-0 by the end of the year. And I was like, I thought he was crazy. I'm like, what is he talking about? But there was a part of me that I kind of like, I started to think about it, and I'm like, I don't know how you're going to do it, but you're gonna have to figure this out. And so part of my experience is not only like training and staying ready and like figuring out how to stay healthy throughout these fight camps, but a part of the process has always also been like getting better at like networking and being able to communicate with promoters. And I spend every waking moment I have like either doing research for fights, or like trying to look up like shows that are going to happen, or you know um watching film, or like strategizing with my diet. I have a whole like fight notebook that I take every day. And this is like the level of, I feel like, obsession you need to be able to pull something like that off, like fighting every 2 months as a pro fighter against higher level guys, and hopefully finishing them in spectacular fashion. So
and when I like researched your fight, when I watched the fights and also like looked on your record, I saw that you made your amateur debut when you were about like 25.
yeah, yeah.
So it's
So
like rather late for the like amateur debut.
yeah, yeah, no. So I mean, I think like, one of the things about me and even my older brother Charles, he's Charles is like a UFC veteran, like had tons of fight of the nights. I think had 15 pro fights in the UFC, and all the UFC video games and stuff. Like we all mature, even in my other parts of my family, like we all mature very late. I feel like I still can't even really grow a beard. Like I don't know, there's just things where like you look at me and I don't look like you know um like a killer, like until I'm like in the cage, with my mentality and stuff. So I think I have a little bit of that baby face and stuff, and I think we kind of all mature a little bit later. And so I'm kind of happy in some ways that I didn't start when I was like 18 and get like discouraged by what could have happened. I think my mindset now is a little better because I'm a little bit more uh open to like taking on knowledge that I might not you know have. Like I think there's a very important thing to have, which is Socratic wisdom, which is understanding that you don't know everything. And I feel like sometimes it's a little harder to come at that as like an 18-year-old or 20-year-old and have that perspective. And those hiccups can sometimes be longer lasting. And so I'm kind of happy I got into it what is perceived as late. Everyone thinks I'm like 24 or like 23 because of how I look, and I feel that way too. So I don't know, but yeah, I mean, part of it too is I went to 4 years of college, and I was really more of an academic. Like I was a double major in philosophy and creative writing. I won awards in it. I ran the school newspaper. Um, I I ran the rugby team. basically I was the youngest person in Phi Beta Kappa, which is an academic honor society. Like I was the only junior in my whole college, so I was really like a good academic student. And like, a lot of people didn't understand this obsession I had with like wanting to become an MMA fighter, and they kind of viewed the two things very inconsistently. Like they didn't think my athletic side and my academic sides. It seemed like, what is this walking contradiction here? And to me, they were always very consistent with each other, because fighting to me in some parts is simply a pursuit of knowledge, which I feel that's what philosophy is. It's a pursuit of knowledge. And so yeah, I kind of took that and ran with it as an academic, because I ended up getting something called a Watson Fellowship. They give it out to like 40 people in the country every year. It's a very rare academic grant, um, like even more rare and more prestigious than a Rhodes Scholar. And I happened to be one of the 40 people in the country to get it, like through rigorous interviews and tons of like essays and things like that. And basically, they granted me this grant to travel around the world on my own for a full year. Like you can't come back to the U.S. the whole time, and explore a topic of mine. And mine that I had presented to them was on looking at mixed martial arts from a more philosophical perspective and an intellectual perspective, and viewing how it brings meaning to people's lives in different cultures and that sort of thing. And I could tell when I first brought up this idea to some of the counselors, and even like, when I would start like, presenting it to the professor boards, I could tell they wanted to hate the idea. Like, you know what I mean? Like they came in and I was like, oh, they see this like rugby, like, I don't know if it was sort of like, I went to a very like liberal arts college, which I like, but I think part of it too is also like, oh, is this jock just trying to get paid to train? Like what's going on here? But no, this is like a very core fundamental thing to who I am is and so I think that like going through that whole process, I think was really important to me in how it shaped my mentality as a fighter. So like I think if I didn't go through that process and just sort of started it, I don't know if I would have been quite as successful or had quite the same mindset for it. So I'm kind of happy that I got a little bit of a later start with it. But yeah, as soon as I did know, once I started it, I'm like, you got to push the pedal to the metal here. Like you got to get experience, 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 and that's what I did. I'm like, you have to be more obsessed and more active than anybody ever. So I try to kind of do that. And I think I fought 18, maybe 17 or 18 amateur fights in about like a 2 to 2.5 year span. And then my pro debut was in May, and yeah, this will be the seventh fight in about a 13-month span. So
And in this 1 year that you can visit any country, what country did you visit?
So yeah, so on my Watson Fellowship, I went to Cambodia to study this ancient martial art called Bokatau. It's Bokator if you're more English speaking, but they say it as Bokatau, and to me that was the most culturally interesting, because it's something that not a lot of people have trained and don't know about. The other one, I went to Thailand and did Muay Thai and Muay Baran a little bit. I learned a little bit about left way, but not as much. And then I went to the Netherlands, actually Northern Netherlands, Friesland, and I trained Dutch kickboxing, which I thought was like, to me, it was kind of my favorite style in terms of actually using it for striking and what I implement into my game now. So, and that was a whirlwind, because I didn't have a lot of formal striking training. I was a state champ wrestler, and loved jujitsu, and still do love jujitsu. I think the most out of any of them, but. Uh, I didn't have any formal striking training. So I was going from like style to country to style to country to style. So it was kind of hard to like, fit those together, because, Bokatau has more of like a crouching style, very low to the ground. Muay Thai is very upright here. And then Dutch kickboxing is very like angular, they cut down at the legs and, have the Dutch touch kicks where they go up and stuff at angles. So it's just very different styles. I think, I almost wish I could go back and like do it now with the mindset I have for martial arts, because I would definitely pick up way more. But it was definitely a cool experience. And yeah, like I said, Bokatau was the most, I think, interesting culturally, if you want to hear more about that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, overall, the Watson was just a really really interesting experience. And it was funny too, because at the end you go to this big conference where you finally meet all the other Watsons that, were for that year. And it was, I felt like I was at, Hogwarts or something, like with all these like, or like, I don't know what the mutant school is in like in the X-Men, but it was like, it felt like that. There were all these like very special people with very different things going on. Like some were looking at biohacking, some were looking at like investigating coral reefs and the deep ocean, and like there was just all these very special individuals. And in my mind, I almost felt like, oh no, I'm just here playing punchy, but they all really embraced me and thought it was very, very cool what I was doing. So yeah.
Yes, it's like definitely super interesting story and the year to remember definitely because visiting so many country and doing something what is like quite important for you and for your like future self. It's definitely in like 30 or 40 years you will still
Yeah.
remember it.
Well, yeah, I think too, it's like it's interesting to me because it's, as far as I'm aware, it's the only academic grant that's ever been given for something that's based on MMA. And so like I take a lot of pride in having that. I take a lot of pride in being one of the only Americans to train Bokatao and know it as this, this fundamental martial art that then evolves into all these other things. And and yeah, to me it's really important to sort of carry that torch, and then to see where it's gone. Now I'm like, a undefeated professional fighter at this stage. I mean it's cooler than anything I could imagine, honestly.
And last year, when you fought in CES, you fought in the same card with your brother. He was fighting in the main event. And
Yeah.
how was it? Did you feel like both of you like feel any like nerves or stress that maybe one of you will lose?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of like, obviously, your brothers. I'll be honest, like, I've felt very nervous leading up to my fight, and people ask me after, like, "Oh, what'd you feel more nervous for?" And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, I won my fight," and then it was like immediately, like, "Oh no," this dread of like, "Oh, I have to watch Charles fight now," So I had to corner him, and both. Luckily, we both like, fortunately won in the first round. And so that was just a really special thing to be able to fight on the same card as my older brother, and have our whole family there with like Team Rosa shirts on and stuff. And it was a real special experience. And it's always funny too, because we're, people literally get us confused. They think we're like, some people literally in Florida will come up to me and be like, "Do you know Charles Rosa? Are you Charles Rosa, or do you know him?" Like, they think we're almost twins and stuff. And even though I have my own identical twin, but yeah, even though we're 9 years apart, people get us confused and stuff all the time. But like our personalities in some ways couldn't be more different sometimes. So it's just funny to like, he's my brother and he's my coach, and it was really meant a lot to be able to fight on the same card as him. It was funny after too, like we went to Foxwoods is, I think, the biggest resort casino in all of the continent of North America. It's like huge, and so I went all the way to go to this after party, the Rosa after party, at the thing. And I'm not really someone who goes to clubs, or like I've never drank in my life or smoked or done anything like that, like ever. I've never even had, honestly, coffee or energy drinks, which people think is crazy, but it's true. Um, but so I went to this after party where my brother was like, "Come on, get here! All the cousins are here." And I tried to get in, and I had my hand wraps on still, and I didn't know, because I've never been to a club like that. I had my like sandals on, and they're like, "You can't come in here with sandals on." So it's always a funny thing to me, I think, is like, despite fighting on the same card and stuff, I got rejected from my own Rosa after party, which I thought I had to go all the way back to the other side of the casino, get shoes, and come back. And they were like, "You didn't know who you just rejected out of the after party," but it's funny. So it's cool to have those kind of memories. Like I have memories of literally with the hand wraps on, like eating cheeseburgers with my brother after, which people say is kind of gross, but I don't know.
And I think that right now you are in the like a very cool moment of your career because you are like super active. You win all of your fights. But do you think that UFC can be like a goal for you in like next year? Let's say that maybe next year Contender Series will give you a chance to fight for the contract.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that's kind of hopefully the trajectory I'm on. I think, like, I want to be a completely different fighter. Because the thing about the UFC or any high level promotion, like I don't want to just go there and feel like I'm good enough to be I'm good enough to kind of be in there. Like I want to go there and feel like I could compete with the people in the highest level. So it was kind of the same way when I decided to first go pro. Like my brother said, "Hey, we need to make sure you're ready because, from my time of getting becoming a pro to getting into the UFC, it was like basically a 2-year span." And so that's kind of thought of it of that trajectory. And when you get to the UFC, you want to feel like you're ready to fight for contention, not just that you're barely winning like fights against people that maybe not as many people know and stuff. So like to me, I want to be able to make my mark and legacy in the sport. And of course, UFC is the highest level of the highest levels. So like that's kind of where I want to be. And I will say, it's a hard thing to do. I think people underestimate like how incredibly difficult it is what fighters are doing because it's not like the UFC is not even the sport of MMA is not like other sports. It's not like baseball or like badminton where there's just like, niche sports in certain countries. Everyone in the world for eons has been introduced to the idea of fighting. So it's had centuries and millennia to develop in all these cultures, and it's only within the past 20 years we've seen them clashing together. And so I think to be one of the reasons why I'm attracted to MMA is because I view it as it's like the biggest challenge. If you can make it to the highest level of fighting, you've made it to the highest level of a sport that every single culture and nation has been introduced to in some way. And so, yeah, I mean that I think it would be an honor to be able to get that sort of call in a year and, hopefully still be undefeated and that sort of thing. So I'm excited for that opportunity. I'm not trying to jump the gun a little too much, but I'm ready for that opportunity. I just always repeat to myself, like even before fights, I just say like when the time comes, I'll be ready. And like I always know that in my soul.
Yes, I think that with your kind of activity, it's like it at that point you can be like 12 or 13 and 0, like
Okay.
contender series next year. So
Yeah,
it would
yeah.
be great. But I'm like big fan of contender series. But I think that UFC sometimes should get a fighter not from the contender series, not short notice, but just pick him from the regional scene because I think that like sometimes the short notice opportunity is of course it's good to take, but it is of course also a risky because if you have like 2 or 3 weeks, you can't be in the like peak of your shape, and I think that it would be good if the UFC can pick just a really good fighter just from the regional scene.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that people actually ask me, like, what would your ideal way to be put into the UFC would be? Would it be the Ultimate Fighter? Would it be, Contender Series? Would it be just a short notice call up? And like, for me, I feel like honestly, like I want to be a UFC fighter. So to me, if I got that short notice call up, I feel like I would actually like that because I feel like I'm one of the people who I'm always ready to go. Like if you tell me like right now, hey, you have to fight in a week, like I'm like getting in the mindset, like I've been training hard, like I know what I've been doing. So to me, I feel ready for those sorts of opportunities when they come in the next year, once I get to that level. But like based on the way I train and stuff, I feel like, for me, I feel like I would want to, get that call to UFC, as an actual UFC fight in a venue and that sort of thing. Just, I think part of it too, that's kind of how maybe I'm just glorifying because that's how my brother got into the UFC. He fought like Dennis Seaver on like, 3 days notice pretty much. I'd like the top 10 guy in the world. So but to me, I feel like it'd be really cool, and I feel like the UFC respects when you do those kinds of things and make those step ups. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think they would give you some leeway. Even I obviously you always hope to win your UFC debut, but I think the UFC respects like fighters who fight. So that's what I want to be.
And, and if I'm correct, Charles fought against Dennis Siver in Sweden, right? It was like because I remember something that Siver was scheduled to fight fighter from France, but in France it was like uh, I don't know, but it was like some limited rule sets. So it was like no elbows on the ground or something like this. So I think that it is what why he was not like in the end scheduled to fight, and that they picked Charles.
Wow, that's crazy. You have a lot of knowledge because like that's something not a lot of people know. That was like something only Charles had told me. But yeah, no, Dennis Seaver was supposed to. They told him like 2 weeks out, like, oh, there might be this, and then they said immediately, oh no, he's fighting a guy from France, and so he didn't really know. He didn't know. He was like, all right, whatever, and so he was already in Holland, I think, at the time. And he told me he was like literally eating pizza when he got the call. So he was, I think, yeah, I remember he was talking about like literally him and actually one of my coaches, Matt Waggy, great wrestling coach, great overall MMA coach as well now. He I think him and Charles said they had done a pizza eating competition like the day, like a week before or something. And so yeah, my brother got the call on like 3 days notice to fight Dennis Seaver in Stockholm, Sweden. And yeah, it's he said it was, I think it actually won. One of the things he tells me, and like I always say it's crazy, it won fight of the month. And the fight that won fight of the year was like Jose Aldo that had actually also fought in that month. So even though my brother won the fight of the month, he didn't win fight of the year, but like it had technically, voted better. So like I don't know, it's pretty cool that he, stepped up in that sort of opportunity and stuff. And yeah, I mean that goes to show like, how that works. Yeah.
And your main gym is American Combat Gym, right? It's like where you always train.
Yeah. So like I'll just say, yeah, American Combat Gym is where I train for the most part. There, like that's has like Matt Waggy, who again really great coach. Has Charles McCarthy, who really helps me with my finishing mechanics. He's like my brother's head coach for a very long time too, and Charles McCarthy's like very very smart guy in the MMA world, and obviously I have my brother Charles there, and just a ton of great other coaches that are there: Devin, Miranda, JJ, and I think even Billy Patton, who is a former Philly style boxing coach of mine. So I mostly train at American Combat Gym. I also train a little bit at MMA Science, which is Roger Crawl's gym, and he's the one who helped Amanda Nunes become the best woman fighter of all time. That's he helped, I think, honestly popularize calf kicks, and then also popularized stab kicks. Like he's always very ahead of the game. He understands that like striking isn't just about who stands in front of each other and punches the hardest. Now it's about like almost it's more of a distance game of direction and distance, and it's like it's just a totally different thing now. Um, and I think he understands that. And so I work a lot with him and his striking classes as well. And yeah, and so then the last thing I do is do a lot of I've started doing strength training and a little bit more of like just overall recovery with Raw Fitness in Boca, and that's with Sam Russell, and he's been pretty helpful in like making sure that because me as someone, the way that I think about MMA, I think it's a very mental sport. Like I think it's about mental toughness. I think it's about a lot of these intangible things that people can't see. If I think if you were before I was a pro fighter to draft like a bunch of MMA fighters, I would be like Tom Brady, like the 199th overall pick. But fighting is not about tangible things. And like a lot of sports I feel like aren't about tangible things, but people sort of overestimate that part of it. And so yeah, like I feel like the tangible stuff is kind of has too much emphasis, but I will say I sort of didn't pay attention to it as much, and I don't want to have to lose a fight to realize I have to be like a better athlete and pay more attention to these biometrics and all this sort of tangible things. So that's why I started using like these sort of biometric bracelets to sort of track my sleep and like sort of figure out like what days I'm like training the best, like what I'm eating, like what I used to be like I'm never counting calories, but like now I have a whole like meal plan where I figure out like exactly what I have to eat and stuff. And I've always been very disciplined and strict with my diet. I call it kale jail because I eat so much vegetables and like that sort of thing. Um but now I feel like, Raw Fitness has helped me kind of like tune in sort of things that I didn't really understand about myself athletically. So like sort of make those sort of fine tunes so them just I don't have like off days, you know?
Yes, it's probably good that like you mentioned before, you are just like always ready, and I think that it in the end it will pay off. It will be your big advantage. And to be honest, I have like many more questions to
Yeah,
you,
go
but
ahead.
I will ask one, but probably the most important one. If you can tell me more about Cryptidpedia, what is it,
Oh
and
yeah, sure.
what was the like reason behind creating this kind of thing?
Yeah, so I have an identical twin. His name's Francis Rosa, and he's the man. He's like my favorite person in the world. But when we were younger, we used to play a lot of like Godzilla, like, if you see my like fight shirts and stuff, I always make this joke that, part of my reason for becoming an MMA fighter is I now get people to wear these fight shirts, and I basically just got everyone I know to wear Godzilla shirts. So like as a kid, it's like sort of a childhood like thing of like, oh, when I was 6 and me and my twin brother would play on the trampoline. And so we always liked monsters and those sort of things, and that sort of started to translate into this like more of this idea of like we also liked mysteries, like, and I really do even to this day, like when I think about like mysterious stuff and that sort of things, I actually really love it. Like it's like one of would be a passion of mine if I had more time to explore it and stuff. But um basically he started making lists of cryptids, which a cryptid is basically a creature that has been cited or folklore in a culture, but nobody knows whether it exists or doesn't exist yet. So, for example, like Bigfoot, Yeti, like the Loch Ness monster, things people have cited and aren't sure about. And people don't realize, but there are tons of these. Like, and some obviously are a little more outlandish. Like, if you talk about like American lumberjack folklore, there's some really ridiculous ones, but there's also ones that end up, seeming ridiculous and end up being proven real. Like, there's something called a coelacanth, which is a giant 6-foot fish that they thought went extinct 200 million years ago, and people kept citing it in Indonesia, the shores of Indonesia, and ended up getting proven. So we basically started making this list, or Francis did, and then I started helping him like sort of compile it to have a little paragraph. And at first we didn't know anything. We would just take images off Google. We had no idea what we were doing, but this is when we were literally 12 years old. But by the time we got to 15, we had really compiled it into something that had a lot of you know I think was very like readable. And we ended up making it into a book. We got it published. We had got an artist to do it, and yeah, we got it legitimately published, and it was on Amazon for a while. It's on Etsy now, and we would go to schools and do presentations on like the importance of literature and like reading as a kid and that sort of goal setting. And we would get the thing that I always found. We were writing it as a book for everyone, but what we found is it's really a book for people that were in our age range when we wrote it. And like people, kids who were like 8 to like, 15 find it to be like the coolest thing ever. Like I've had the biggest compliment I've had about the book is people have told me, my kid doesn't read a lot, but he loves your book. He's obsessed with your book. And that's kind of a thing like that really hits home for me because I feel like, anything that gets kids reading and like invested in interest of theirs is a good thing. And so that's sort of part of where the whole, King of Monsters comes from, like, is because, I wrote a book on cryptids when I was like 15 and got it published, and it's been pretty successful. Pretty recently, we actually also got a book deal done with this thing called Cryptid Crate, which is, cryptids have become pretty popular in the past like 10 years with, hipsters and everything. So they've been sending, this subscription service sends, cryptid related mystery content to different subscribers. And in their Cryptid Crate box, this past month or 2 months ago, they had Cryptopedia in there, so it was pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's cool to just have people who are interested in that thing now. I think they have like hundreds and hundreds of subscribers, so a bunch of Cryptopedia went out to them as well. So it's just cool to have your work out there.
So you are definitely man of like many talents, but of
Yeah.
course, like it can be seen in your next fight because I think that it will be another finish for you. So your record will improve, like it's always improving. So thank you for the time and for conversation, and I hope that maybe after your another win we can talk again.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, hopefully after this big win in Boston, I'll be able to come back on and have a little bit of a victory meal. And instead of kale jail, hopefully I'll be eating a cheeseburger.